Hello and welcome to Atheists Talk. I'll be your host for today's episode. My name is James Zimmerman, and today we're going to be talking to the author of the book Move Upstream, A Call to Solve Overpopulation. With me today is the author Karen Shragg. She is a lifelong environmentalist, naturalist, educator, and author. And she began her career as a naturalist way back in 1983 and has been the director of the City of Richfield's Wood Lake Nature Center since 1991. She's also a former public and private school teacher, and she holds 3 degrees, 2 from the University of Minnesota, 1 from St. Thomas. Currently, she's also a member of the advisory board of the nonprofit World Population Balance. And in that position, she's become deeply alarmed by the lack of discourse surrounding the problem of overpopulation. So her book was recently published, and we're going to delve into it more today. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank me at the end of the show. So let's start right in. The first thing I want to know is, what was your inspiration for writing the book, and why do you think it needed to be written?
Well, I was looking around at books that are on this topic, and there are some, and it seemed to me that their whole focus was to basically say, you're about to fall off a cliff, good luck. There's no hope. We're screwed, only they'd use words that I can't say on public television.
Sure.
And they would say, guess what? It's all over, but the fat lady is singing, and she's singing. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, then why are you going to waste people's time writing this?
Right.
If there's no hope, if it's going to happen, if it's inevitable. No one was writing a book that's saying, it's pretty serious. In fact, it's very serious. But we can do something about this. We can solve this issue. No one that I could find was writing a book that wasn't just grim and dire and doomsday-ish and all with the facts correct. But I wanted to write a book, and the last chapter is called Trend Need Not Be Destiny. And I really don't think it needs to be. My inspiration was to write something that had a light that said, go this way. Mm-hmm. We need to go this way. So many of the books said, we're screwed. And I thought, I don't read books like that because what does that do?
Yeah.
It doesn't really help at all, and I wanted to help. That's sort of how I'm wired.
So a number of times in your book, you seem to indicate, or actually sometimes you outright just say, that people who are involved in otherwise good causes, like their cause and their own time and energy and activism, could be aided if they would get behind the idea of solving the overpopulation crisis.
Right.
So why do you feel that way, I guess, is my question.
Well, because if you don't take in consideration how many people are going to be needing our limited and declining resources, and you try to act, as I call it, downstream, you're going to be like that hamster in a cage that's busy and moving, and then you're in the same place. Mm-hmm. And I think you're even backwards. You go backwards because you're not considering that wherever you are trying to bring fresh water to, or you're trying to feed people, that if you're not considering what is the ecological capacity, what we call the carrying capacity of an area, then you're going to end up in trouble. Mm-hmm. Just like any animal. I run a nature center, and it's clear when we have an overpopulation of geese, you can't walk on the trails.
Right.
We have deer that just about decimated our forests because they were overpopulated. Each individual animal is beautiful, but the conglomeration of all of them is pretty destructive. And we're just another animal on the planet, although a lot of religions wouldn't want you to believe that.
Yeah.
We're somehow, exempt from the laws of physics, which of course we're not. And so I think that if an organization is to be successful in saving the rainforest or saving the people from flooding, all those things, they have to incorporate the issue of overpopulation. They don't have to abandon their issue. They're always going to care about whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Look what's happened with people who care about rescue dogs. They're very involved in the sterilization of dogs so that we don't get more dogs. That's not considered to be a taboo. That's considered to be a great thing, because we don't want dogs starving on the streets. But when people are starving on the streets of India, Calcutta, or any of these cities where people are just in horrific conditions, the idea of saying we need to stop having children is considered to be a horrible thing. So you don't see organizations saying, hey, will you give your money to help make sure people are sterilized?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's considered awful. So my advice is to open your heart and mind to the success you will be having when you consider the total story.
Yeah. And thus the title, To Move Upstream, closer to the source of the
That's
issues.
right.
So you brought up a good point. This is Atheists Talk after all, so we need to find some sort of reason why you're here on Atheists Talk.
Right.
On page 53 of your book, well, let's see, I don't have time for the whole paragraph. I'll just start it off. The Catholic Church is often the first religion one thinks of when naming adversaries of overpopulation. It is not alone. And then you proceed to talk about that. So maybe in a nutshell, how is religion resisting this major issue?
Well, I don't want to pick out any religion is really at its core, just like any NGO. They want to keep going. And part of keeping going is keeping more people in the flock.
Right, yeah.
And so when you're saying limit yourself, they're looking around and going, well, if we limit ourselves, whoever they is, will have more power. And that there's some truth in that. But there are no winners on an overpopulation. It's like whether you are in steerage or whether you're on the top floor of the Titanic, the result's the same.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's really important to realize that it's really monotheism, as Gloria Steinem so well calls out in her latest book. It's monotheism which has this sort of core message that humans are extra special, and whoever we is, have been chosen by God, or we're extra special because we're this particular group. And then if you say to them, we have to limit ourselves, they find that to be incredibly antithetical to their dogma, really. And so I'm saying we're human species. Well, first of all, I don't think they even agree with that. We're one species on the planet that's taking over the planet.
Yeah.
And if we become a planet of only humans, we will become a planet of no humans, because we need all these other species. We need land, we need bees, we need all these things that help us live, and we have these sort of blinders. So religion, as we know it today, the three major religions that are around, is really, they don't want to hear this message because it means less people tithing to the church or tithing to the synagogue or whatever you belong to. People want members. I'm telling them we need less members. So, then the message isn't something they want to give.
You make a good point in the book that generally the more children someone has, the more you can pretty much assume that they're religious. In so many words you said that. I think the example you give is the Duggar family, who had a reality TV show.
Right.
The title of the show even celebrates the number of kids. I think they keep having to update the title of the show because they keep having more kids. But it's true, if you see someone, at a grocery store with 7, 8 kids, I mean, not that I give it that
Either
much
that
thought,
or
but
they're
as I'm
a
going
sports
by, I
fan,
just think
and
they're
they want their own basketball teams
could
or
be
something
too.
like
Yeah,
that.
there's that, yeah.
But I'm not a sports fan, but which one has the most on their team? That's what they want. Either they're religious or they want a lot of team members. I think that you said reality TV. That's not reality. Reality isn't you're able to have as many people as you want. And it's very, very self-centered. To be selfish is to have less children. Selfish meaning I would like a better world for my child. And self-centered is I want more children because look what I've done.
Yeah.
Look what I've
My
produced.
genes are great.
My genes are great. Look what I've done. I want people to be selfish. I want them to think of themselves and their progeny, and the world as we're heading into the next century is not pretty. It's a climate chaos world where we can't predict the weather. The weather is chaotic. There's more vapor in it. It's a closed system, this planet of ours. We've been pumping fossil fuels in it since the Industrial Revolution, and there's no release valve. There's no little hole that says, no, you can go here, you can go to Mars, you can go to Venus. It's here. It's been here. And it's like being in a car with your windows rolled up on a hot day. It's pretty warm in there and something starts melting. If you have ice cream in the car, it's going to melt. And our glaciers are melting. Our oceans are rising. It's so clear. Yet we still have climate change deniers. And, it's part of a cycle. And it's part of a cycle that we are inspiring. And so it's so important to remember that religion can be a guide on how to live, but it can't go against the laws of ecology, or it's not going to be a good guide. And I think we have to grab onto that narrative and not be afraid to say that.
So I have here that I wanted to ask you, what are the obstacles to understanding overpopulation? I think we touched on a couple already, including just someone's religious background might bias them to giving it a fair shake, a fair rationale. But what else besides religion do you think is stopping people?
I don't think they're hearing it. I mentioned this in the book. A friend of mine, I asked him, do you know the numbers? And to me, the numbers are, how much are we overpopulated by, which is over 5 billion? When did those people come onto the planet, which is the last 80 or so years? Mm-hmm. How much are we growing by, which is like about 78 million a year, and now it's up to, I think, a little bit more than that, 10,000 people an hour. I said, do you know those numbers? No. What organization do you belong to? Oh, I give money to Greenpeace every month. It's their fault. You don't know that. You don't know those numbers. That person was open to that. When I told him the numbers, he went, wow, that's amazing, Karen. And I said, you don't know that because that group is not telling you about it.
So when you say someone's not hearing it, you're not necessarily meaning that they're being willfully ignorant. You're meaning that the message
they're not
just
hearing
isn't
it.
Being given.
They're not. It's not that they're not listening. They're not hearing.
Okay.
Listening to me is you're just, you're looking like this when somebody's telling you a message. They're not actually hearing it. When you see flooding, like I just heard today that Baton Rouge has gotten more rain this year than in 174 years of recorded meteorology. And but what should the next sentence be? Inspired by climate change caused by overpopulation. If you heard that on the news every time there was a weather report, if you heard that there's a drought and people are starving and that it was caused by overpopulation, people would get it. I don't think people majority of people are resistant to the truth, but they have to hear the truth, and they're not hearing the full truth.
So maybe we can draw a little bit stronger comparison between overpopulation and climate change because, for example, in the documentary Cowspiracy,
just saw it.
Okay, so then you'll know. The point is made, or the argument is put forward that talking about the bad effects of agriculture and herds of animals used for beef, that's off the table. That groups can't talk about that, especially if they want a seat at a newsroom or in a journalist's interview.
Right.
So is there a parallel there with overpopulation?
Oh, I saw it, and just about, my eyes were, were bug-eyed when I watched it, and I said, exactly. And actually, when I finished watching it, I wrote the producers of the show and I said, if you think your issue is thrown under the table, if you think you've knocked on the door of, I think they knock on the door of both Greenpeace and Sierra Club and don't get an answer, try what I've done, which through World Population Balance, we've sent out letters to, I believe, 74 Minnesota environmental organizations and said, look, you have to start telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so that you can be successful in what you're doing. So we wrote to all the organizations that are associated remotely with the environment. And you know how many people responded?
How many?
A -1.
-1? What do you mean?
The one person who did respond said, no, it's not a problem.
Oh, okay. I think, actually, maybe we can find something in here that you said. Page 85, let's see. It is frustrating to hear about a global crisis followed by feeble recommendations. Best-selling author Thomas Friedman personifies this phenomenon. In his book, Hot, Flat, and Crowded, Friedman concludes that we must embrace green technology to wiggle our way out of climate change. And then you mentioned he joins a lengthy list of activists who are shirking their duty in warning the public.
It's so frustrating to me. These are people, I believe, far smarter than me. They are prolific writers, researchers. They've devoted themselves to being what I call part of the Enlightenment. And so many issues I find their writings to be very informative. But on this issue, they are so off base. We cannot solve this issue with technology. We cannot grow more corn per acre. Again, feed more people, get more people.
Yeah.
That is a very basic ecological fact. And it's really must be what I call in my book a scotoma, a blind spot, that people can't see that what they're doing isn't working. It's like I saw on a show the other day, someone had said, there must be a God because my beautiful wife would never have loved me without God. And then afterwards,
He must have been a pretty bad guy.
But then she died of cancer, and then had a child that had a disability. I'm going, again, try to make sense out of that line. It just doesn't add up. And not that human thought has to add up, but when you're a writer and you're a speaker on issues that matter, like a lot of the people I mentioned in my book, and I'm a fan of them. That was probably the hardest part. I'm a huge fan. Otherwise, of a lot of the people I talk about, Vandana Shiva and Amy Goodman, all these people I really think are just heartfelt activists. If they got this issue, I think the whole thing would be turned upside down. So one of the biggest obstacles is hearing the truth out of the mouths of people we otherwise feel are very, very dedicated to making the world a better place.
You talk about a need for a shift in public perception.
Yes.
Do you think that that's something that could help, or how long do you think that would take?
Well, we don't have a lot of time. I think we need every voice. I think we need to knock on the door of everyone who says, yes, I'm here to make the world a better place. And if they all just, what about tomorrow, if every comedian and someone who wants to point out the fallacy. I mean, I have contacted with the last couple, John Oliver, huge fan of John Oliver. He loves to point out how we are just screwing things up.
Yeah.
So what if he took on this issue? People would go, wow, I respect John Oliver, therefore I'm going to listen. I'm going to do and I want people to do their own homework. See, I'm kind of different as when I do talks on this thing. I said, I would love to be proven wrong. I'll go home and garden and do things I love to do. I want to be wrong. There's no personal agenda in here other than I feel like I'm seeing someone about to fall off the cliff and I'm just grabbing for their jacket and saying, please don't. That's all I feel like I'm doing. I don't feel like I'm particularly brave. I feel like it's sort of to me, it's a visceral response to how can we keep doing this?
So in your book, you compare it to smoking, where at one time it was just the cultural thing to do. It was accepted.
Right.
Nobody thought twice about it.
Right.
And then it slowly began being perceived as a negative thing, something that was harmful to people. And then there were certain outcries when smoking was banned, say on airplanes or in restaurants. Right. And then you make mention that even recently here in the Twin Cities, smoking has been banned even in some outdoor places, such as nature centers. Is that the one
Correct.
you mentioned in your book?
Yeah.
Okay. And you say no one even murmured anything upset about it, which then this would have been unthinkable, 75 years ago. So
well, first you change the story and then you change the policy. Because if you start with the policy, people like, oh, that's government control. Right. And so that's been my personal experience, is we have banned smoking even in the parking lot around the nature center for many reasons. Not only is it, people tend to throw their cigarette butts, they're still doing that, but I can now say, yeah, I'm sorry, you can't smoke. And they go, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they apologize.
They apologize right away. And I think that it's not that people stop wanting to have large families or stop, but if you tell them the full truth, do you really want that child to grow up in a world where they're going to have to wait in line for bread, where they're going to have to wait in line for water? Is that really fair to that child? Then it becomes an issue of morality. I do think that it is a moral issue and a moral choice.
So two things that come to mind to me with that comparison is that smoking isn't an inborn desire. I mean, obviously people become addicted, but people are just naturally going to want to have children, whereas most people, if they're 25 years old and they've never smoked a cigarette, they probably don't have any desire to.
Correct.
And then also, if someone does want to smoke and they do it in their own house or in their own car, I'm fine. That didn't bother me. But if someone has 10 kids, it does bother me. So in a way, the analogy, of course, isn't perfect. I'm sure you don't think it is. But how do we address those things? That there's this, inborn tendency or inborn drive to have children, and then also if someone else, if the Dugars want to have 19 kids, that negatively affects me. Whereas if the Dugars just wanted to smoke in their own house, great, be my guest.
Well, two things I'd beg to differ on. One is if they smoke in their own house and they get lung cancer, your healthcare costs go up and mine go up too,
Mm-hmm.
because it's extremely expensive to do lung surgery. It's extremely expensive to put someone on the long-term care that they're going to need if they get cancer, stroke, all the things
So
that are
it does
implicated.
affect other
So it does
people.
affect
Okay.
other people. That's number one. Number two, I don't believe everyone has a biological urge to have children. I think that we never give women permission to say you can be a whole person without it. I think there's a very strong cultural tendency to say, to someone like you, like me, how many grandchildren do you have? I said, none, and I'm fine with that, and I'm child-free by choice, and they look at me like, oh, didn't you? I really didn't have that urge, partly coupled with my knowledge of what I believe that child and their progeny were going to face in the future. Because my eyes have been open to this issue ever since I read The Population Bomb. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is, what if we decide, well, we'll have the one kid or we'll adopt one kid, and then we're going to have children that would be, that we were responsible for each other. So you say, okay, I'm going to have one child, you're going to have one child, then together we're going to make sure that, okay, I'll pay for your kid's education, and you can pay for my kid's college education, and we can almost act like siblings. We can have these extended families.
Yeah.
They do that in indigenous families all the time. Everyone who's a friend they call uncle in certain tribes. Wouldn't that be great? Then your family responsible for each other. So I think what people really want, they want someone to take care of them in old age perhaps. They want to have that feeling of making a difference and belonging. I think there are alternatives to that. What there isn't an alternative to is having enough water in a world that's overpopulated.
So, I guess I just forgot my thought. I know that you talk a little bit about this in the book, but what would you think would be, say, the ideal family size then?
Well,
I think you would say 0 because we're so far overpopulated. But
well,
if things were to right themselves.
I think that ideal is a weighted word. Ideal, I grew up with a family of 3, and that was ideal from the downstream perspective of it's great to have siblings to help when your parents need you.
Oh, sure.
Great. My husband's now an only child. He lost his sister many years ago, and taking care of a parent as an only child is a big challenge. So ideal is a weighted word. On an upstream level, we have to look at the ideal from a numbers perspective. If we had started back in the 60s to just level off at 2, that would have been ideal. Now ideal is 1 or less, because we're headed to 9 billion, even if we all stop at 2, because the median age is so young in most countries. They still haven't had their children yet.
Okay.
So if we're 5 billion overpopulated now, that sends us to 9 billion. So ideal meaning to have a future of some kind, 1 is ideal, but hopefully people could get together and create these sibling units. That would be, so it isn't ideal, it's not preferred. I think the longer we wait, the less ideal our choices are.
So I don't want to take too much away from what's in your book, because you want people
We want people to read it, that's right.
to read your book, to buy your book. But apart from having no children or 1 child, what do you think people can do?
Insist that all of the groups they belong to, and I'm sure everyone watching the show belongs to some group, that they not only adopt this issue as their own, but they insist that every time they are ready to go and work for a candidate, we're in a political year this year, that they inform them about, become the informer of the issue. And don't let it be something, I had Karen come to talk to their group one time, and then the next time the issue's sort of on the back burner and we're on to the next issue. It is every issue. I think that's the main thing I'd like. It is every issue. It is the reason why it's taking you longer and longer to get to work. It's overpopulation.
Yeah.
It's the reason why that cabin up north is just not as much fun because the lake's getting too crowded. It's overpopulation. So it isn't something you can just say, check the box, I did it. Or people say, I'm older, I've already had my children, or I haven't, what can I do? Make sure people understand that every issue they care about, if you look under the covers, there's overpopulation going, here I am, and that's the reason. And if it's the reason, then you can't ignore it. The more we ignore it, the more problems there is. So we need more voices, and we need to insist And look at the success of the gay rights movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. They just insist that they're right, and they're doing such a good job of making sure they're holding everyone's feet to the fire. We just don't have enough hands to do that.
So we're running out of time here, but I lost my thought again. It's one thing that you talk about a lot in your book and that you've touched on in this episode here is that education can really help too, because like when I was reading your book and preparing for this show, I was thinking about my circle of friends and families and acquaintances. Nobody that I regularly spend time with has 4 children. Few have 3, many have none. So I think it's pretty good. I mean, it's not ideal, but it's not the best, but I think it's pretty good in my circle. But I realize that that's not representative of the whole world. So when I say, between these 20 adults that I know, they have 18 kids, that's pretty good. But another 20 adults in Bangladesh might have 60 kids. So then we wonder what we can do. And you talked about education, how that can help is a big thing. We just have like a minute left, but maybe if you want to touch on that.
How about the word compassionate education?
Okay.
We're not trying to tell people what to do from a power perspective. We're trying to tell people what to do so that their children have a better future. And isn't that a great thing?
Yeah. So if people would like to learn more about your book and about compassionate education, what can they do?
I think they just need to get this issue in their head first and then in their heart, and it'll be very easy. I think I think people will be running to get vasectomies. I think they'll be running to buy birth control. I think they'll be trying to fund and they'll be insisting that their environmental groups speak out on this issue.
And where can they get the book?
They can get it at freethoughthouse.org.
Okay. And if they want to just learn more in general about overpopulation, did you have one website that you wanted to mention real quick?
Worldpopulationbalance.org.
Okay, I think we're going to put that address on the screen too. So, okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for listening or watching our show. We appreciate it. Again, we talked to Karen Shragg about her book, Move Upstream. So get it. It's a great read. It's a pretty quick read. It has a great cover. Illustration on it, and there's a lot of interesting things we didn't even have time to touch on, including why Richard Nixon is actually worthy of some applause.
He is.
A little bit, yeah. So anyway, thank you for joining our show tonight, and if you would like to learn more about us, please contact us at the phone number address that you see on the screen. We'll be happy to send you a copy of our recent newsletter so that you can learn more about what we do, what we stand for, and the activities that we do. Because if you're interested in us, we're interested in you. So again, thank you.